Hi, this is Estelle Erasmus, your host for Freelance Writing Direct. In this short soundbite-filled podcast, I'll cover everything the freelance and creative writer and author needs to do to move forward with their writing, their creativity, and their career. Through conversations with guests, we'll cover tips, tricks, and actionable strategies. So join me every week and grow your business and build your craft with Freelance Writing Direct. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes and Spotify. Hi, everybody. It's Estelle Erasmus for Freelance Writing Direct, and I am so excited. I'm like over the moon today with my guest, Jane L. Rosen. And I have such a great respect for Jane. I have to show you her books, 9 Women, One Dress, and then Eliza Starts a Rumor, and A Shoe Story. And her latest book is On Fire Island, which you can see behind her where she's standing. And I just want to tell you a little bit about her, besides that she's an author, screenwriter, and Huffington Post contributor. She lives in New York City and Fire Island with her husband and 3 daughters. She's the author of, as I said, 9 Women, One Dress, Eliza Starts a Rumor, A Shoe Story, and now On Fire Island. And On Fire Island just got an amazing review from Publishers Weekly, and I want to read it to you because it's just so lovely and heartwarming. In Rosen's poignant and humorous latest, After a Shoe Story, the ghost of a recently deceased woman observes her loved ones as they try to move on. Editor Julia and writer Ben Morse had an idyllic marriage before Julia died from cancer. Ben, devastated, ditches the Shiva service at their New York City apartment for a trip to Fire Island, where he and Julia shared many happy moments. Julia follows him and witnesses their friends react to her absence and continue their lives without her. As well, Ben finds companionship and a foil in Shep, who owned the Morses' house for many years with his late wife and can't seem to stay away. Meanwhile, Julia's best friend Renee, whose dull husband finally ditched her for his assistant, finds comfort and affection in Gabe, a drummer 20 years her junior. A plumber, her teen son Maddie exclaims when they meet, pretending he didn't hear correctly. Rosen has a winning sense of humor, bringing levity not to awkward and painful moments, and she packs the narrative with vivid details of beach life and city life. This is a treat. So congratulations on that wonderful review from Publishers Weekly.
Thank you. It means so much when a trade that like that gives you a great review.
And it's a treat, which it really is. So I just want to dive into this because, as you can see, I've read all 3 of your other books, and I read On Fire Island. And when I first started reading, I was like, oh my God, the protagonist is deceased. And I'm kind of a squeamish person. I'm thinking, I love her work, I love her writing. How am I going to react to this? But you really drew me in with your narrative, with your character development, with the stories, with the stories of the marriage between Julia, an editor, and her husband, who becomes a widower, obviously. And I think that it really was a different choice than what you've done before for your 3 previous books. So can you talk to me a little bit about why you made this choice and how you wanted to incorporate it into the other POVs?
So On Fire Island was originally a screenplay because I was originally a screenwriter. So this screenplay was actually with Harvey Weinstein when he was arrested, not physically on him, but with his company at the time. So now, like, it's the story I've always wanted to tell. It's a story that means more to me than any other story. But in the screenplay, it was just 3 men. Julie was hard, she was mentioned, she was talked about, but she wasn't the narrator. So now fast forward to me deciding to write this as a novel and already, establishing myself as, let's say, a woman's fiction writer. I wanted to bring the female voice, to the forefront for the book. Well, whose voice would be better than Julia's? So basically, I incorporated her telling the story, which opened up so much for me. And it opened up the chance to talk about, their life together. And it opened up the chance to talk about, more female issues like childbearing and things like that, and infertility and all these different things. So it kind of grew into that.
And the idea of picking somebody who was no longer in the physical plane, like how did that evolve? I realized that it was a screenplay, but how did you come up with that? Is it based very loosely on somebody that was in your life, or was it just a point of view based on what, seeing the movies or something that you came up with?
So my sister passed away at 39 years old. So and it was a while ago, but and it was of breast cancer, not ovarian, but I'm very familiar with someone passing at that time. And my sister had children. And at the time, I thought if she didn't have children, it would have been so much easier for her to just let go. And so there was a lot of that in it. I also, because my sister passed away and my father passed away when I was 11, it's always been very important to me to keep these people in my life, daily life. So with that being said, I wanted to show that approach to death, like that someone's not really gone. You know what I mean? And I took a 6-week class with a rabbi in London about the afterlife and kind of the Kabbalistic view of the afterlife. And I learned so much from that. And then I went and did some work with like mediums to see, how that would be. I'd never done that before. So all of those things kind of all came together. Also, my mom passed away a few years ago, but the experience of my mom passing away at my age now, not when I was a kid, had me really like looking for signs after she died. And I felt like different things happened. I had dreams, different things happened that also made me a little more of a believer in this afterlife situation. So I think I took all of that and brought it together to create Julia and feel like it wasn't just a lark that the ghost is like that there's some proof behind it in my head that this could actually occur.
Jane, that's fascinating and explains so much of the grounding behind what you wrote, because it's almost like there's nothing in this book that feels woo, a ghost is got. It's right. Very grounded. It's very much Julia kind of being her same personality that she was when she was alive, but having a bit more perspective, so to speak, and having powers. Obviously, she could choose to go here and there in different places. But that is really, I think, the fact that you've dealt with grief on different levels and losing somebody. And so you could write it from the perspective of somebody dealing with grief and somebody healing. And I think that you cover both in your book so beautifully. And yet there's humor. So talk to me about the humor, because you're funny and nobody expects, I'm always like, oh God, a book about grief, a sad story. But the humor and the not side characters, but Shep is definitely a funny one. And you like having these maybe older Jewish men as kind of these foils that are hilarious. I mean, you had Cy in A Shoe Story, and you had Max in Nine Women, One Dress. And so talk to me about the evolution of that, and a little bit more about the humor and how you either consciously want to put it in, or this is just who you are.
I mean, okay, so life throws things at you, right? And you can't do much about that usually, but you can like still see the humor in things. And sometimes in the worst moments, the funniest things happen. And because of the contrast between them being the worst moments and the funny thing happening, it makes it even funnier because you kind of need that release to laugh. I mean, I could tell you a zillion stories of things that happened during like my own shivers for people that I love that were so funny, but you laugh all the more deeply because you're in pain, right? So it's like the contrast makes it, it's like a mountain, you know, the peaks and valleys. And when you're at your lowest and something funny happens, it doesn't stop happening just because you're at your lowest. Funny things happen all the time. And that's what life is: good, bad, funny, sad. I mean, so that's the way I like to write. I like to, you can't just stop living because something happened and not laugh, you know?
So it's like a release, but it's like, this is just how you look at life, or did you consciously decide in a book that had death as a main character to add in humor?
I didn't consciously decide. It's just the way I think. And I don't think that one should be curtailed. I mean, who would want to read this book anyway if there wasn't all this laughter in it? There's so much laughter in it.
There really is. So talk about the Shep and your choices of these kind of old, funny, quirky, eccentric men in almost each of your books.
I know. I didn't even really realize that that was a pattern for me. And I guess it is. I guess I could blame it on my dad dying when I was so young. And maybe I have a hankering to be near an old guy, to have someone around me. Although I don't think my father was quirky or particularly funny. The funny thing is, in A Shoe Story, Cy, the older character, is directly taken. His whole trip in World War II is directly taken from my father's time in World War II in the Coast Guard. I researched his boat number. I got his letters that he wrote home to his mom. So that entire story is literally based on my dad. Though Cy is nothing like my dad. And that was my father's name, but he's nothing like him. He's quirkier and he's a fish guy and all these different things that he is. It's not my dad's personality. It's my dad's story in World War II. And it's my dad's love story with my mother, all taken right into the book. So I think it all has to do with me losing my dad. If I really wanted to get, psychologically into my brain, I probably like to spend time with an old guy that I didn't have,
Wow. How creative. I mean, what a creative way to fulfill that, that kind of gap.
I wasn't doing it on purpose, just happened.
I think it really adds depth to it. So you kind of have, it's almost like fashion is a fourth or fifth character in your books. So is that a passion of yours?
Well, Nine Women, One Dress specifically came to me because, it's the story of one dress and 9 women who wear it. And the one dress is at Bloomingdale's. And I was in JFK Airport at the luggage carousel, and someone knew I was a writer. I was a screenwriter at the time, and said, I have a great story. I heard about a dress at Bloomingdale's that came back covered in formaldehyde. And I was like, whoa. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't stop thinking of it. And I took that, and that's obviously the ending,
Yes.
No big deal. But I took it and traced it back through 9 different women. So like, being that was my first novel and it was about the dress, I then thought about the shoes. So it's not so much, I was in the garment center, and that is why 9 Women, One Dress has so many like little idiosyncrasies that are so spot on, because it was my first career. And so obviously fashion was a thing for me. But I would say at this age, I'm not all that into fashion. But after I wrote the shoe book and tried on all those shoes, and oh my goodness, like Louboutin gave me shoes, everything. Now I'm a shoe obsessed.
I
So
love that.
it's kind of like art imitating life, imitating art, imitating life.
Hi, this is Estelle Erasmus, your host, and I'm the author of Writing That Gets Noticed, Find Your Voice, Become a Better Storyteller, Get Published, which is available for pre-order from New World Library. And if you send me a receipt showing that you have ordered the book, I am happy to send you my 10 best writing tips. Email me at freelancewritingdirect@gmail.com, and I can't wait for you to read the book. Talk to me about if somebody is trying to write a novel, how do you recommend that someone start or even start coming up with an idea or structuring it? Like, what kind of actionable advice can you offer?
I think my most actionable advice is really just to write like no one else is reading it. Just to sit down and start, first of all. That's the number one thing. If you don't start, if you just keep talking about, a lot of people want to write memoirs, I find lately, that talk to me. If you just keep talking about, I'm going to write this memoir, you're not going to. Just start. It doesn't matter. It's not going to look anything like what it looks like at the end when you start it. Just start it. And I love to just get up in the morning and write. So if you have that luxury when your brain is clear, just keep going. And if you get stuck, don't let people say they have writer's block. Just keep writing, write right through it. If you have to put a few X's in your manuscript because you can't think of a word or you can't complete an idea, but you know it's somewhere in your brain, just keep going. Put some X's to mark your spot, keep going. So those are some things that
I write the word something. When I can't find a word, I write just something, and then just keep going. But, a lot of times people just feel consumed with their day to day.
You could write anywhere.
Yes.
You could write on your phone. I write on my phone all the time. If I'm sitting on the subway, I take out my notes. And if something comes to me, it doesn't mean you have to use it, but you could write on your phone.
I want to ask you, what is coming up for you next? I know that Eliza Starts a Rumor is being optioned and looked at for a TV series. So what's, how things evolving?
That's a very exciting thing. I'm loving the producer that optioned it. And I'm really I just have such a comfortable relationship with her. Her name is Dana Honor, and she's fantastic. And I just feel confident in her. And she's also a great communicator, which is usually, I sold 9 Women, 1 Dress to people. I'm not going to say who, but I never heard anything except when it was time to renew the option. So this has been a great experience because I'm not writing it, but I'm a little more involved and I'm kept up to date, which is a beautiful thing. And I'm excited. I'm very excited to see, because I was a screenwriter, I'm very excited to see something come to life and be able to watch it on television.
Do you watch a lot of television? I have to ask the question.
I do watch television at night before I go to sleep. Yes.
Anything?
I loved Shrinking. Did you watch that?
No.
Oh, it's fantastic. That's been my favorite lately.
I'm going to add it. I've been watching Succession. I mean, that was.
Don't say anything about Succession. I'm not caught up.
Okay. Won't say a word. Won't say a word.
Don't say a word, because every time I go on Instagram, I'm like, oh, I think I know what happened on Succession.
You just people should have the warnings on those things.
Crawl in a hole.
And are you working on a new project? Like when you finish a book, because you're so prolific, right? So what do you start working on another project the minute you're done?
Pretty much. I mean, somehow I've gotten on this merry-go-round of just spitting out the books, but I also appreciate it so much because if I'm not working on something, I'm not really happy. I like to have something to work on. Right now, I'm writing a book called 7 Summer Weekends, which is also set in Fire Island.
I like the title. I like alliteration. So 7 Summer Week. I like that.
Me too. Which is funny because it could really be 8 summer weekends, but it just doesn't sound as good.
Keep the alliteration going.
It's kind of like, trapping me in this 7, but I do love the name.
But you like the setting of Fire Island, clearly. So that's.
Yes. I mean, I also love New York City, and I don't think I'm going to just stick with Fire Island. There's not that much that you could do in Fire Island because it's kind of like a Groundhog Day-ish kind of place. Like you've been there,
I've been there. Yeah.
It's just really like every Monday is the same. Every Tuesday is the same.
It's relaxing. There's something relaxing about
Yeah,
it because
there
you
are
don't
no
have
cars.
the pace of the city. I remember I used to have a share house in my 20s, decades ago. I remember getting on the ferry and you just would leave and you'd be like, and then you would see, and you remembered where I was at Cornell Estates, but I was also at the main one, which was
Ocean Beach.
And then everyone would go to the market. There was kind of like one market and everyone would wheel their trolleys back from the market. It was
So
fun.
I met my husband because he got arrested at that market for drinking a Snapple.
OMG, that's hilarious.
Yeah. And I went into the police station with him. We had just met and we walked up to the beach to get a Snapple. And I followed him into the police station. And I said, this is my boyfriend. He just got off the boat. And I was explaining the rules to him when you took him in. And I don't think that's fair. I didn't even have a chance to explain. And they let him off. And literally that was it. We were engaged 5.5 months later. He was like, you're sticking by my side. I can't believe you just told me.
Wow. You really proved your mettle.
Isn't that funny?
And then there's I don't want to give too much away about your book, but there is a jail or a potential jail scene in there too, but I don't want to give it away. It's such a great read. And I'm so thrilled to be talking to you. Where can people find you on social media? And online?
I mean, I think that I'm mostly an Instagram girl. I have a Facebook and a lot of people follow me on Facebook at Jane L. Rosen, but I think I pay the most attention to my Instagram, which is also Jane L. Rosen. And especially if you've read A Shoe Story, I have every shoe in A Shoe Story on my Instagram page. So it's very fun.
That is funny. You appeal to so many people. It's people who like good stories, people who like fashion, people who like kind of sagas, like, the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. That's sort of 9 Women, 1 Dress, but a little bit different. Historical, Jewish culture, because that's imbued in all your books, and wonderful women protagonists who go for what they want and have relationships in a brave way. So Jane, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing about your journey, about your book, some tips on writing. And everyone, get her book On Fire Island, the latest, the greatest, and not the last by any means. So thank you, Jane.
Thank you so much, Estelle. I loved chatting with you and I really appreciate all your support. Thank you.
My pleasure. And everyone, stay tuned. There's so much more happening with Freelance Writing Direct. Bye. Follow me at EstelleSErasmus.com on my website and on social media, which is Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Estelle S. Erasmus. And we're now on YouTube for Freelance Writing Direct. And if you're interested in sponsoring an episode or 2 or doing an episode takeover, please email me at freelancewritingdirect@gmail.com. Follow along, and soon everyone will be reading what you're writing.